Philadelphia newsroom. President of Phillies baseball operations Dave Dombrowski now addressing the media on the season just passed.
On my right and Santino on my left with microphones. Please just raise your hand and we will get a microphone to you. And we are ready to go, so we can start with, let's start with Todd on my left.
Hey Dave, just wondering what the status is of all of your coaches. Are they returning or any changes?
Yes, basically we have extended Rob Thomson for 2026 and all the major league coaching staff will be back.
And can you, I mean, anytime a season ends in disappointment, failure, whatever, sometimes there's changes in the coaching staff just to get a new voice in there. Why did you guys feel that that was not necessary at this time?
Well, I think we have a good coaching staff, primarily. I mean, they do a very efficient job. They did lead us to 95 wins, and they've been with us for a couple of years, a lot of cases 3 years, and some beyond that. But they're very efficient. They do their job well. We have a good manager. They work well with the manager. He reports they report directly to him. He would have liked all his coaches back. So to me, it was pretty simple in that regard. It's hard for me to, anytime you're right, you do have a disappointing finish, which we did, but it's also hard to put that on their backs in that case. So I think we all share collectively in what happened, but it's one of those where putting it on any of their individual backs, I don't think was the right thing to do.
And then why was it important to extend Rob an extra year?
Well, I think, first of all, he's done a good job for us. I mean, he's been a very successful manager. There's very few clubs in baseball that have made the postseason 3 years in a row. He has done that. We've been a very good club under his guidance. It's also one where I think stability in the manager spot, I don't think going into the manager's last year is ever a good situation to be in if you can prevent that from happening. He deserves the extension in that regard. I don't really want the focus. If you go into, I've been in the position sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, where your manager goes into the last year of his contract, and right off the bat you lose 3 games in a row, and there's speculation on his job status. So I think it secures that people know how we feel about him. He's done a good job, and it gives us stability in that role. So he's deserved it, really. He's done a great job for us.
Okay, let's go to Marcus in the front.
Rob, do you believe that the structure of this roster with the 5 veteran, well-paid hitters and the 4 pitchers you have under control, or 4 pitchers you have in your starting rotation, and the 2 young infielders, do you think that this is the bones of a team that can win a championship, or do you think that significant changes need to be either made or additions need to be made?
Well, Dave, I think you mean too, right? That's it, right? Like, yeah, I figured Rob. I didn't see him. I thought you meant me, so
Maybe
that's why.
I'll ask him the same question, I promise.
Okay. Yes, I do think it's a good roster. I think it's a good club. I think it's a club that's capable of winning a world championship. We've been close. We won 95 games. However, you're also open-minded to making adjustments. I think that's a necessity. You want to get better. You're never happy unless you win the whole thing, and we didn't win the whole thing. So I think we have a real good core of players. But again, I think we'll be open-minded to see if we can make our ball club better. So that's really our goal in this case. I think we're in a situation where you look at our guys. We had eight players make the all-star team. That means you have a lot of good players. We're in a position where a lot of when you talk about the veteran guys, they're really good players at this time. But you're always open-minded to making adjustments, however you may need to be better. So that's what we'll do. We'll go into the winter time with that mindset.
Okay, we'll go to Scott on the left.
Dave, you guys were 61-32 after the sweep of the Dodgers here, and 34-35 the rest of the way. I kind of wonder how you sort of reconcile the first 90-plus games with the final third of the season, and where you feel like maybe things fell down a little bit.
Well, it's the up and down nature of the game at times. I wouldn't have anticipated us to have that same pace the first half of the season. Yet I wouldn't have anticipated we'd have a 500 record the second half, or right around there. I think there's a few factors. I mean, some guys were hurt at times, ups and downs of that regard. We just didn't perform quite as well at times during the second half of the season, some of the players. And I also think that, and I'll take the responsibility, when we went into the trading deadline, we were in a position where we looked at a lot of different things, and the fifth starting position was in a spot where, at that point, we felt pretty comfortable where we were. You looked at the acquisition of what some other individuals would be, but we had Tyler Phillips, who was pitching very well at that time. We had Tyon Walker coming back in about 10 days, and we didn't think he'd pitch the way he pitched. We figured we had Spencer Turnbull coming back at the end of August, and we felt that he had pitched really well previously to getting hurt, but we thought he'd be able to step into the starting rotation. Well, none of those things worked for us. And so really what happened is that fifth spot, that's why it's a little misleading, the record. When you look at the fifth spot that we had, that was not a good spot at all for us the last 2 months of the season. So let's say you add 5 or 6 wins to there, which would be the case. That person, if we acquired him, probably wouldn't have pitched in the postseason for us. So we looked at it saying, okay, we think we're good enough to win our division as we stand. We did think those 3 guys, we'd come up with one of them to pitch well for us. And then also over the last couple of months, Ranger dealt with a lot of little things with him, nothing of major consequence. But all of a sudden, we are not going out there with a consistent 5-man rotation, which I think is very important, and we did earlier in the season. That was successful. So I think that had a large contribution to that.
If I can follow too, I'm just curious, like offensively, were there times where you felt like the group, the lineup as a whole was too easy to pitch to? Or, I mean, how did you sort of assess sort of the ups and downs that you guys had offensively?
Well, yeah, the unfortunate part, you have a tendency to focus only on your own club, right? This is a downtime from an offensive perspective in professional baseball. What was the average? 243 at the end of the year. Most of our hitters were better than 243. You see the scores in the games in most of the postseason. There's not a lot of run production taking place. So at times we are vulnerable to being pitched well, as are other clubs. But I can't say that like going into the last 2 months of the season that we thought, oh, that was going to be a major issue for us. But it's something we'll look at. We'll take a look at trying to address to see if we can make some changes. Sometimes, we talk about, it's interesting, and I know a theme is chase rate, right? I mean, everybody I read in here writes about chase rate. I think it was interesting, we got eliminated. We were 6th in major of the 12 clubs in chase rate in the postseason. And so that's not good, but it's not the worst. We didn't hit. We really didn't hit. Some of it's chase, some of it's approach, some of it's guys not being hot. We actually, if you looked at it, we chased less than the Mets did in that series, percentage-wise. But at times they got some big hits and we didn't. And so it's something that we're cognizant of. It's something we'll continue to try to address. But the reality is we have a good lineup. I think we were in the top 5 in Major League Baseball in runs scored, and we'll continue to strive to be better. But I also think that a lot of clubs are vulnerable to being pitched well. I mean, our starting pitching really shut down the Mets in the postseason, all in all. Unfortunately, our bullpen picked a bad time to not pitch well, and they had been very good almost all year long, particularly the back end of the guys. So sometimes, when you look at it, there's clubs that win 2-1, 1-0, and we just didn't do that. And then part of that was we didn't score enough runs, but we also, our bullpen did not have a good series.
Okay, go to Tim on the right.
Dave, by old and new school metrics, Trea Turner has really struggled defensively since coming here. Will he remain at shortstop moving forward?
Well, when you say that, his metrics are very similar to what they were before he came here in many ways. So Trea has been, he will be our shortstop, yes. He's going to be our shortstop the coming year. But we also feel that sometimes you have to be careful with some of that, and I'm not sure which metrics you're using, but they're not always 100% the defensive. We put some, we rely on defensive metrics, but there's also not a perfect way of describing the defensive aspects of the game as far as we know. He did not have not an outstanding defensive shortstop. He does have good range. He makes really good plays at times, but he also makes too many errors at points. But he has improved. He's worked hard, and I wouldn't be surprised if he continues to improve despite his age.
Well, in terms of errors, defensive runs saved, outs above average, he has gone in the wrong direction the last couple of years. Why do you think that will change as he ages?
Well, he works hard. I mean, first of all, he's the rare player, and one of the reasons when he signed for a long-term contract, he's very athletic. And so his speed is still very good. He's still one of the fastest guys in baseball, so I don't think you can compare his aging process to, let's say, the average player. But he's a guy that's just very athletic. He works hard. He's got a good infield instructor in Bobby Dickerson. We saw some strides ourselves this year on some things that he improved upon. So that's why I think he'll get better.
Okay. Alex, front row on the left.
Hey, Dave.
Alex?
You mentioned the trade deadline earlier, and I'm wondering just how you would assess the moves that you guys made in general.
Well, we were very happy with the trades that we made at the particular time. I've been in this role before where sometimes you make moves and they turn out great. Other times you make moves and they didn't really turn out as well as you would like. I think in our situation here, I mean, there were really two major acquisitions we made at the trade deadline. Tanner Banks we liked, and Tanner Banks pitched as we would have thought he pitched. We think he helped our bullpen. He's somebody that'll be with us for an extended period. But he's also not a guy that we really acquired with high leverage in mind. So we got Austin Hayes, who we liked a great deal. Unfortunately, Austin Hayes got hurt almost immediately. He got hurt, and then he had the kidney infection. We really never saw a good version of Austin Hayes. So if you judge it on that, that was not very good. Didn't work out well for us. We like Carlos Estevez. He did a good job for us. He was solid. He helped shape our bullpen. I really liked even how he threw in the postseason until he threw the pitch to Lindor. So he was the one guy that threw the ball well before that. So we added the players that we thought we needed to add. Unfortunately, Austin Hayes got hurt, and there's nothing you can do about that.
And when you look at the high leverage relievers, their performance in the bullpen, do you kind of see that as like an aberration, or like what do you kind of make of their outings in particular?
Well, I would think it's more of an aberration, yes. Anytime you see a guy struggle a lot, you get perhaps a little concerned. I don't think they were overworked or overtired. And we all are searching for that answer ourselves. I still like our group, our core group of guys going into next year. We like them. Of course, a couple of them are free agents, as you're aware. I'm not sure where that will take us. But we feel very comfortable with Strom from the left-hand side, Alvarado and Banks, and then we like Kerkering. So as high leverage type of guys. I'm really not sure what happened at that point. I was as surprised as anybody, as I think all of us were at that point, because they had pitched efficiently. They have been in the postseason before. They're not young guys. Kerkering was the youngest, but they've had the experience. So I really, that probably surprised me more than anything, because when you have good start and pitching, which we did, sometimes you do win a game. I mean, you look into the first game, you're winning 1-0 going into the 8th. Well, a lot of times in the regular season, we'd win that game. And then we didn't. Our guys just didn't perform very well at that time.
Okay, Anthony, right in the middle.
Yeah, Dave, I have two questions for you. First, about Alec Bohm. How do you look at his season? This started off so well, becomes an all-star, and then has like a slow decline. And then how concerning was it that Rob had to pull him out of the lineup for Game 2 against the Mets?
Sure. Well, Alec Bohm's a good player. I mean, he's starting third baseman for the National League team. I mean, he's a good player. He knocked in 100 or close to 100 runs 2 years in a row. He's one of the top hitters in the league. He's improved defensively. He had an outstanding first half of the season and not an Alec Bohm second half of the season. But he overall is a really good player, and he's a good player on the team. You know, anytime, the manager has to make those decisions on what he thinks is the best thing for his club. We knew he was coming off an injury that affected his hand, which makes it more difficult to hit at times. So Rob thought that we needed energy, and that was a move that he was going to make. He went into the game later in the day, into that particular game. So, I mean, those are the things I leave in the manager's hands. I mean, I wish he wasn't in a slump at that time. I wish he was swinging the bat well, but he wasn't. And the manager has to sometimes make moves to try to spark things.
Second question. A year ago at this time, we sat here, and you had some uncertainty about what your outfield was going to look like coming into 24. Now it might be the same uncertainty still existing, maybe even a little bit more. How do you look at your outfield at this time, and how you're going to approach it going into the offseason?
Well, I mean, our outfield, yeah, it's more uncertain than our infield because our infield's basically set at every single position, and catching and a lot of starting pitchers and that. So, I mean, our outfield, all in all, has, I think it's turned out to be very average at the big league level when you look at it. I think we have one guy that plays every day, Castellanos. We like Marsh still. We like him. I think he's a good player. When you look at his numbers overall, he's good. He could play left or he can play center. We like Rojas, but we need offensive improvement there from him. We have a plan this wintertime. He's going to live in Clearwater. We have a plan from an offensive perspective. He's reduced his chase rate. He's still an outstanding defensive center fielder. He can run. But I can't say he's for sure going to be our center fielder. And then we have Hayes, of course. We'll have to make a decision in that regard. So I'm not sure how it will be, but I would think that a couple of guys for sure that are part of that equation are Marsh and Castellanos, and then we take it from there.
Okay, go to Dan right in the middle.
What are you going to do with Taiwan Walker?
Well, Tyon Walker, he did not have a good year, as we all know, so no need to pound that into it. We have sat down with Taiwan before he left. He was given a very detailed program from a conditioning and throwing perspective. Not that he's in bad condition, but and to get him ready to try to get him back to be the pitcher that he was in the past. He is in a position where I'm convinced he will work hard on that to get it done. I would think he'll come to spring training with us next year, but he's not guaranteed a starting spot. I don't think I can just say, hey, you're our fifth starter. I think he would come to camp and be in a battle to try to win a spot in the rotation.
And last year in the spring, excuse me, Bryce and Scott Boros both kind of lightly broached the topic of reworking his contract. Has that been brought up since, and is that something you think will even be on the table this offseason?
So I didn't, what names did you mention?
Bryce Harper, Scott
Bryce
Boras.
Bryce, oh, and Scott Boras. Okay, I didn't get the second part. Really, when it comes to, as I've said this all along, contract negotiations, I always keep private. I don't think there's anything to be gained by sharing any type of contract discussions, yes or no.
Okay, go to Devin on the left.
Hi, Dave. So before the NLDS, you mentioned the window and if it was closing, and you talked about all the young talent that you have coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Given, guys like Alec Boehm in the series that they had in the postseason, knowing you have guys like Aiden Miller and Andy Painter kind of waiting in the wings, how does that play into your roster and personnel decisions this offseason?
Well, I do think, and again, that's a common question, is your window over? Well, as I said, we have a very talented group of players, and we have some veteran players, and we have that group of guys in the middle now with the Boehm and the Marshes and the Stotts and the Sanchez's, that group. And then we have some young players also coming. There's a little bit, I don't think, well, Aiden Miller, I don't anticipate being ready this coming year. Crawford is coming very fast. I'm not sure that when we go into spring training, we're not going to count on him being one of our big league starting outfielders, but he's a lot of ability. Wouldn't surprise me if he came in any time. Andy Painter's another whole different situation. He threw for the first time the other day. He is a very, very talented individual, and it's apparent he's healthy, and he'll get a limited number of innings in the Arizona Fall League, and then be in a position where we're going to have to make a determination how we're going to use his innings next year, because he's not going to be a guy that we can throw out and count on pitching 180 innings at the major league level. But I think with those veteran players, we're not at a position where they're still not productive. I think they're productive at this time. You're always concerned as players age, the aging curve. But I don't think the window is closed as far as the Philadelphia Phillies are concerned. I do think that you close windows when some guys age and some of them are not part of your next step. But we're in a position where we have some good young players, and we have some other good young players in the organization too. The farm system's come on a great deal. Brian Barber and Preston Mattingly and Jorge Volandi will lead in the different groups that we have. And so it'll be a matter of moving people in. And we also have an owner who's been very generous to us, and I think we'll continue to do that. So I think the Phillies have a window to be a good club for years to come. Will all of these players be part of it? Most likely not.
Okay, let's go to Corey on the left.
Dave, you mentioned that Dave, you mentioned the chase rate. You guys are middle of the pack in terms of the playoff teams. You also have 4 right-handed hitters who skew more toward aggressiveness than selectiveness. How do you push this thing forward offensively next year if you're in a short series again? There's the randomness of playoff baseball. Do you need a certain sort of offensive profile? Is the guys changing their approach?
Well, that's a whole year away, and we got a whole off season to deal with that. We also still have 4 left-handed hitters that should also balance that versus a right-handed pitcher, for example, when that ends up coming into play. And so even though they do, I wouldn't put Bowman at all as a guy that's a big chase guy. In fact, he's just the opposite. He swings often and usually makes contact, so he's in a position where he's not a big chase guy. And so you look at, there are the other guys there, but I think it's one in which we're going to appraise what ends up happening for us. I mean, it's a situation. I do think sometimes, too, it's an interesting comment. You all read everything that's out there, and some of you wrote it. So Trea Turner said, in his situation, I feel at times we get ourselves out. All right? It's a very enlightening comment because that is true at times. And other clubs know that. So we need to keep working with these guys where we can make the proper adjustments so they don't keep doing those type of things and don't keep. And we have a group that chases quite a bit. I mean, Nick's a chaser. He's better this year than he was. He worked better. He got a nice 2-strike approach. Trea's a guy that has traditionally done that. He's chasing a little bit more than he used to. But he doesn't need to be that type of hitter. I mean, he's a guy that can use the opposite field, and we'll encourage him to keep doing that. So everybody's an individual case as you go through it. But I do think it's something that we'll continue to focus on and try to get them to not chase as much. And there's we reduced it some from last year, and we'll continue to try to do it going into next year. Short series, a lot of different things happen. We had a lot of the same players in the past, and it's eventually, we made the World Series, went to the LCS this year. Unfortunately, we stopped in the first round here for us. But you look to get better, but we do have a lot of good players.
Okay, go to Matt in the back left.
Dave, will your payroll be higher in 2025 than it was in 2024?
I do not know that at this time.
Do you have the wherewithal to have a higher payroll next season?
I can't. I really can't. When you say that, I can't even answer that question. They're all tied. That's really the same question. So I really don't have anything to say about that because we haven't sat down and had that final discussion. But I have no indication that we're not going to continue to be aggressive in trying to have a aggressive payroll.
And you've talked a lot about the status quo so far. Where do you think you can upgrade this roster? Where do you look to upgrade this roster this offseason?
Well, I'm not really going to give you all those things at this point because I think it's a situation where then it's easy to say, well, if you do this, then you're getting rid of this player, right? I mean, the reality is we have a lot of good players, right? I mean, and so I think we just have to be open-minded to exploring what's out there for us, talk to some clubs, and see what ends up happening. That process hasn't started. Sometimes you trade good players for good players. And so those are the areas. I mean, the reality is we have a third baseman, we have a shortstop, we have a second baseman, we have a first baseman, we have a DH, we have a catcher. Probably need to, and we've talked about Russ JT a little bit more as we go forward. We talked about Castellanos, we talked about Marsh, so there's one outfield spot. The reality, we like our bench, we've got some good bench players. So if you're going, we have 4 solid starting pitchers, we can upgrade the 5th spot for sure. Our bullpen really pitched well, but you always want to look at your bullpen and see if you can get better and how that happens. But we've done a good job. Our people in the organization have done a good job at taking guys that are not high-profile relievers and making them productive pitchers for us. So we'll explore that. But I think it really comes down to an open-mindedness of conversations and see where that takes you.
Okay, Dave, you're in the front.
Hey, Dave, you've already touched on Trea's fielding, his athleticism, his acknowledgement of chasing and getting themselves out. I guess overall speaking, what gives you the confidence, and I know he was an all-star and a starter, that he can deliver at a high level in key spots at times in October for the remaining 9 years of that deal?
Well, I'm not going to talk 9 because that's a long way out, but I'll talk the immediate future. He's a good player. You know, I mean, he's got a lot of talent. He's a very, as you said, he's an individual. He's very smart. I think he'll make some adjustments himself. So I just think that he's a good player that sometimes in a short series, guys have a good series, sometimes they don't. But with the talents that he has, I don't see why he cannot have a good postseason.
Okay, go to Ty on the left.
Hi, Dave. You just mentioned maybe JT resting more going forward. He's, played a lot of games compared to other catchers. What might go in to a plan to kind of get him more rest and off his feet more? And do you feel like the current group of reserve catchers is strong enough to kind of be able to handle that and step in a bigger role?
Well, first of all, Rob Thomson will have to sit down and talk to him a little bit more. I mean, it's going to be one that we just ourselves, though, have said that. We have some guys that we are capable of doing that. But it's hard to play once 8 days or 6 games or something and produce from an offensive perspective. Defensively, we've done very well. I don't have any concerns about that. Stubbs has been solid in that regard, but that's a tough job for a guy to just play every, whatever it is, 6, 8 games. We like Marshawn a lot. We think he's a real good catcher, and he's shown some offensive prowess also. He is out of options for next year. One of the things with Marshawn we have to do is, it's been unfortunate, he's had a lot of injuries, but when he's played very well. So I think we have some people capable of doing that internally, but I can't tell you that they'll be for sure given the job. We just have to keep an open mind as we explore that this wintertime.
Okay, Jeff in the front right.
Hey, Dave. I know you mentioned Andrew Painter. Obviously, he's not going to throw 180 innings next year, but what role do you envision for him for 2025, and how soon do you think he can get into that role?
Well, he's going to be a starting pitcher. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, he has to earn a starting position with the big league club whenever it gets to that point. It's just the rust is just coming off. It's like the other day he was throwing great. He gave up 2 runs, which is very unusual for him. He doesn't usually ever even give up 2 runs. But he'll get better and better and better as he goes out there, so the rust will come off. But the main thing we want to make sure is that he's healthy. He knows he's healthy. He's ready to go into spring training. Where I don't know is because we need to figure out how many innings we feel comfortable for him to pitch next year, and then we need to have a plan in that regards. Does he pitch at the minor league level for a while and then come up? Does he pitch 2 or 3 innings in the beginning and then have more innings at the back end of the year? Does he have a consistent number of innings all year long? Pittsburgh, I read what they did with Skeens. He talked about how happy he was with his situation. He started in the minors, but he wasn't coming off an injury either. So all of those are factors, and I don't know the answers at this time. Those will be things that we talk about leading into spring training next year.
Okay, go to Dave Murphy in the middle.
Hey, Dave, you mentioned that other kind of bucket of prospects that you have outside of Miller and Crawford. Kemp, Racones. I mean, you have a few guys down there, college guys. Any of those players, guys who you think are close enough to getting a shot next year that you would factor them into how you approach the offseason?
Well, I don't think they're guys that we're going to say they're for sure with a spot on the team. I think they're guys that if they come to big league spring training, which I would guess that they would. We haven't made those decisions either. They're talented enough that they could do that. Unfortunately, Rincones has been a guy who's been hurt a lot, so he didn't have a full year. If he would have had a full year, the answer to that would probably be yes. But he's also a very talented guy with some power. He can swing the bat. He's playing in the Arizona Fall League, so we'll end up seeing how he continues to progress. Kemp's a guy that he's really come out of nowhere in many ways, so he's a guy that could come to camp and surprise, but I don't think that we're counting on them to be part of our opening day roster in 25.
And then Turner, if you look at his fly ball rate has kind of spiked a little bit here lately, and the line drive rate is down, especially when you compare it to his MVP kind of season. Are there things you see in his swing that you think maybe an off season can get him back to being more of a line drive type of guy?
I think so. I do think so. Kevin Long has talked a lot about that. Rob Thomson, we've talked a lot about it already. And I think that we're not looking for Trea to have to hit the ball in the ballpark on a consistent basis. We're just not. And sometimes But he can, as you can see, he's got tremendous power. But I think the value of him, and when we talk about the lineup and different things, well, sometimes it's approaches too. Turner's approach, really, we're much more comfortable if he's more of a line drive doubles hitter that hits the ball at the ballpark some. I'll give you another example is Bryson Stott. I mean, for us, Bryson Stott should be an on-base type of guy. He's a guy that we're not looking to hit 20 home runs. He's a guy that can work the count. He has a good eye, although he didn't show it this year. So we think that Stott can come back and do that. So that gives you a little more balance of all of a sudden if Turner and Stott doing more of that. And I think some of that can be internal for us. And they're important parts of our ball club in that regard.
Thanks. Mike on the right.
Dave, when you look at upgrading the roster in some spots, what type of player do you think this team needs, or what type of skill set are you guys looking for in upgrades?
Well, that's a general question. That's a really tough one to answer because you just have to wait and see when you talk to people. You're looking to make your club better. You're not looking to be in a position to just change faces. So I think you're in a position where it depends upon who's available and how we weigh that and how they fit into your club. So, I mean, the way I would answer that question, we want championship players. Now, describe that. Well, there's a lot that goes into that, and I think that's how we approach it.
Okay. Where are we? Todd on the left.
Dave, when you guys signed Zach to the extension in March, a lot of questions asked about future payrolls, and John was asked about, can you guys possibly acquire more star players? He said, I think there's a way to do it if it becomes a necessity. I'm wondering, A, do you think it's a necessity to acquire a star player this offseason to get you over the top? And regardless, are there paths to do it either through trade capital or other moves you can make to maybe get yourself in the running for a star player?
Right. Well, I don't think we need to add more star players. We have as many stars as about anybody in baseball. So I don't think necessarily that you need to add more, and I think you have to be a little concerned. I mean, John is very accommodating and giving, but you're also in a position where you're still working with the payroll and trying to make things work for you and go into the future, what you have. And yeah, I mean, would you be open to it? Yes, but I think you have to be careful because sometimes it's not only the star players, it's also sometimes the supporting cast. And when you look at it, again, we had 8 all-stars, right? I know they're not all veteran guys, but that's more than anybody in baseball. We have, when you look at our starting rotation, I don't know that of the top 4, there's a better starting rotation in baseball. When you look at some of the positional players, they're really good. So I don't necessarily think that the answer is always a star player. I'm not saying we won't get one, but I don't think it's a necessity by any means.
And then Hoffman and Estevez are both free agents. Do you see yourself signing one of them? Is it unlikely that you could bring back both, knowing where you are right now with payroll?
Well, you never know with payroll because you don't know what other adjustments and changes that you end up making. We'd like to have, we like them both. It's hard for me to imagine that you end up bringing them both back under the circumstances because I would gather they're both going to get offered long-term big dollar contracts, which they're going to be looking for. I don't see us spending that type of money on 2 relievers in our bullpen, but I'm just not sure at this time. But we like them both.
And then one last one. Is it important for you to extend Ranger? Is that something you probably would wait and see how he does next season?
Well, we like Ranger a lot. I mean, understandably so. And we liked the Ranger the first half of the season better than the second half. He didn't have and then there was a lot that was involved in that from his own perspective. But he's a good pitcher. We're all very open-minded to having Ranger in the organization for a long time.
Alex in the front.
You mentioned upgrading the 5th starter spot. Given the uncertainty of when Painter would be ready to come into the rotation, how do you navigate that? Does that make it a little bit more difficult to upgrade that spot?
Yeah, perhaps, but I mean, those are things we have to figure out, really. I don't have that answer at this time with the season just ending, Painter just pitching. So, yeah, I mean, it does make it a more difficult chore in the sense that you're not sure when he's going to come back. Do you sign if you sign somebody, they're looking for a chance to get the ball on an everyday basis. There's some complexities in it, but nothing that's insurmountable.
And you mentioned Walker's going to be doing an off-season program. Is it going to be what he was working on during his rehab stint, like the weighted ball stuff, or is it going to be something different?
Well, it's a continuation of that plus more. Yes.
Okay, back right.
You were quoted as saying, regarding the playoff format, is that you would prefer to play in the wild card if you could guarantee you could come through it healthy. Would you like to see the playoff format tweaked in any way?
Well, I don't have a good answer. I mean, you can ask that, and no matter how you face it, right? Well, there's always challenges. Well, unfortunately, when you look at it, the challenge of having the bye, we're the only one that didn't come through it, right? So the other three clubs ended up overcoming that this year. And I think that, yeah, if you talk to, so you can do that. I'd rather make sure you're going to the second round, however you do that. If you talk to Baltimore, if you talk to Houston, those type of clubs, I'm sure they would have not wanted to play that divisional series because they lost. There's a lot of different thoughts and ideas. We've talked about this since it first was indoctrinated way back when the original wild card came into play. There's a lot of different ideas. I don't have a solution that solves the problem, unfortunately, when you have it. But the other thing is that, hey, we had a chance to get it done and we didn't with it. So, and the other clubs did. So I don't have a 100% answer that this is what I would like to see for the playoffs.
Okay, take a few more, starting with Matt.
Dave, what do you think the club's offensive identity should be moving forward, and is it different than what we've seen?
Well, describe offensive identity to me when you're talking about that. I don't know really even what you're asking me there.
Approach, things that are stressed.
Well, our approach, I mean, we're going to continue to approach and do things. I mean, your goal is to score a lot of runs, right? I mean, that's what the more runs than the other club, and to lead the league in runs scored. I do think at times you can always get better. I mean, you don't want to strike out a lot if you can avoid that. But yet, if you have a big power hitter, that kind of comes with the territory. You don't want guys who are not power hitters striking out a whole bunch. And even your power hitters, you don't want them to strike out a lot. I do think that you continue to emphasize two-strike approach. One thing I would like us to do, and that's going to fall into Kevin Long's hands, I really would like us to use the whole field a little bit more at times. We've become a pull-oriented club at times too much for me. That sometimes gets in the postseason when you look at it. A lot of our hits didn't come the opposite way. And that's something we've already talked about ourselves. Now, the hitters have to buy into that too. They have to be in that position. And sometimes, you hear, I can't tell you how many times during the season, I don't even have a number of this, where you'll say, well, we tried to do too much, right? We didn't do that. Well, what does that mean? It usually means that you're not trying to use the whole field, that you're trying to, and it's not like somebody's putting it on their own back to say, oh, I want to be a hero. They're just really getting sped up in the moment. Whatever happens, and everybody's different. But I myself would really like us to use the field a little bit more than what we do. And we do it well at times, but then we run in other times where we don't. And again, it's something we've already talked about.
Okay, Taryn, back left.
Hello, Dave.
Hello.
I'm going to ask you to simplify something that I know you're not going to want to simplify. But when you were mentioning to Todd the number of stars you have in the clubhouse, the starting rotation, the all-stars on this year's roster, when you look at a team where their expectation was the World Series and you have all of those raw materials, what is the final missing piece, you think, to putting them over the edge in the postseason and finally getting that World Series, whether it's health or a player? What is the missing piece you felt like for this year's team?
Well, I don't think that's to me, the answer is not the missing piece. The answer is playing well at the right time. And so when you say that, I've always felt you go out there with 4 good starting pitchers, right? Well, we have 4 good starting pitchers. You go out there with a good bullpen. Our bullpen didn't pitch well. It just didn't. I mean, that's the way it is. But I really thought going into the postseason that it's an incorrect judgment by me and by a lot of us that we thought our bullpen would. That's what you're looking to do. We didn't score enough runs. We just did not. I mean, we scored runs in 1 game. We did not score runs in 3 games. And so you go back in the past years, there's some games we scored runs and there's other games we didn't. But you really have to play well at the right time. I've been with a lot of really good clubs. I mean, I was with the clubs in Detroit that had 3 future Hall of Famers on it and a lot of star players and won our division almost every year. And we never won the World Series. It's hard to win. There's a lot of good clubs out there. And so you just have to be the club playing the best at the right time and maybe get a break or two there. But that's what makes winning so feel so good, because it's so hard. And so you look at, when I look back and I say, okay, again, some of you may, the Atlanta Braves dynasty, right? They won 12 divisions in a row, and they won 1 World Series. It's hard. And so I don't think it's necessary. We have the talent to win. I mean, we can dissect it however we want, and I know you will. We're talented enough to win. We didn't play very well in the postseason this year. We just didn't as a club. Some guys did. I don't want to say that everybody didn't, because some people, you'd look at Zach Wheeler, you'd say, God, you couldn't be much better than that, right? But this was not our, to me, and that's what kind of hurts more than anything, when you look at the club and you say, that's a good club. Now, we weren't playing great all the way through the second half of the season, but there's a lot of really good players on there. And I read our players' comments, and they know it. We just didn't play well. So I don't think there's any secret formula. And hey, when I'm not putting, we didn't play well, but I take my responsibilities. I'm sure Rob Thomson will take his responsibilities. But sometimes you play well and sometimes you don't. And it just breaks my heart that, but I've gone through this. I went through in Detroit Tiger clubs that were just phenomenal. We went through it with Boston before we won the World Championship. And that's where sometimes you got to be careful, because in Boston, we were there 2016, we won our division. 2017, we won our division. We got knocked out in the first round both times. We didn't even, now there was not the extra wild card like there is now. We lost both times in the first round. It was like, son of a gun, we got a really good team. But we won the whole thing the next year after that, 2018. So sometimes you play a little better, you get on a roll, you do the right things, and sometimes the same players can do it for you. Now, sometimes you have to make adjustments with things, and you have to be open-minded to it. I know, like for myself, I look at it, and you asked about the trading deadline. Well, for me, it really hurts that Austin Hayes didn't have a good 2 months, right? We thought, I take the responsibility, that Austin Hayes was really going to help us. And versus the Mets, right? Left-hand pitching, right setup, right matchup. He gets hurt. He gets sick. And he wasn't the same player after that. He's been a good player in the past. So you have to click at the right time for those things to happen. And I don't always have a rhyme or reason. I know we worked hard during that week off. I saw us. We faced live pitching. We did velocity machine. We did the curveball machine. We did all that stuff. But we just didn't play very well during this postseason.
Okay, finish up our last two. Destiny, then Tim.
Dave, do you think this team lost its edge at some point after getting off to such a hot start? And if so, do you think there's a lesson to be learned there?
Well, I can't. When you're around the club every day, like I am, and you try to get a pulse of that, I never sensed that there was a let-up where people looked at it and said, okay, we're going to hold back on this, we're going to hold back on that. I never sensed that. But you watch the same games as I did, and we were not playing at the same caliber of baseball the second half. And we ourselves would say, what's going on here? How come we're not playing quite as well? Tried to identify those type of things. And we went through a down spurt. But I don't think it was where we were, like there was any lull as far as the approach was concerned. It just, again, we had a down period. Then I thought it kind of kicked back there for a while, which it was. I don't really get as concerned as others do on how you finished the lap. Once you've clinched, you need to keep, if you lose some games at that point, it's not really quite as high on mine, because I've been on clubs that have lost at the end of the season and they do great in the postseason, because I think at that point you want to keep your players sharp, but your philosophy is, how do I keep them sharp and prepared and healthy to go into the postseason? But we just didn't play quite as well.
Okay, Tim, last one.
Dave, would you like to extend Kyle Schwarber this offseason, and how do you balance that with the amount of players you have signed into their 30s now?
Well, we like Kyle Schwarber a lot. He's somebody that's been up, but we haven't gotten into any type of off-season projections on who we're going to sign or not sign at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Everyone, for your time. We'll have
Thank
Rob
you.
Thomson here in a
Thank
few
you very
minutes.
much.
Dave Dombrowski, the Phillies president of baseball operations, saying a couple of things. One, and most important, I do not think it's a missing piece. I think it's playing well at the right time. He also says Rob Thomson, from whom we will hear in a moment, Rob Thomson and his entire staff will be back for 2026. No one will lose their jobs. He says there are few teams in baseball that have made the playoffs 3 years in a row. Also, he contends that the Phillies have a strong core. How many superstars on this team, he said. How many teams have more superstars than the Phillies? So we're doing pretty good in that area. With regard to the chase rate and the frustration that he and the team and the fans felt about the players chasing pitches in the offseason in particular, he said we were 6th in chase rate out of 12 playoff teams. Were we the best? No, but we weren't the worst either. We've got to improve there. And then he echoed Trea Turner's words, which he said after the postseason, you know, sometimes I don't think they get us out. I think we get ourself out. With regard to trades, he said, hey, I was happy with the trades. Sometimes they work better than other times, but with regard in particular to Austin Hayes, he was brought in to handle left-handed pitching, and he got hurt, and it just was not a fair sample size with regard to Austin Hayes, and really indicated, Dave Dombrowski, that almost everybody will be back. He said our infield certainly is set, our catcher situation is set, although he did leave room for JT Realmuto perhaps playing less time because it's a tough position, and it sounds like they'll be looking for another catcher to step in there perhaps more than a couple times a week because it's a tough position to play. Regarding the outfield, he said that Nick Castellanos will continue to anchor right field. He said he likes Brandon Marsh, although he could not say exactly whether he would be a starter or where he would go for next year. And with regard to the relief pitching, he said, I was surprised as anybody. These guys are veteran enough. They have enough experience. They have playoff experience, and it's about pitching well at the right time, and that did not happen. But as he said, it's hard to win championships. And he brought up at the end of his availability the Atlanta Braves. He said, look at this Atlanta Braves team. They won 12 division titles in a row, yes, but they won just one World Series. It's hard to win. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, Rob Thomson, the manager of the Phillies, with a new contract extension, talking about the season just passed.
And same thing with the microphone and questions. We're going to start over here with Dan, right in the middle.
Rob, I guess first up, the extension. How do you feel about getting at least one more year? And are you taking it year by year at this point, or do you look long term? You'd like to keep going?
No, I think year by year is good with me. I've mentioned it many times. This is the only place I want to be, and this will be my last stop. I am also very happy that our entire coaching staff is coming back, because many managers will say it, but I truly believe that we have the best coaching staff in baseball. They work hard. They care about the players. They respect the players. And they get results for the most part.
Let's go to Lachlan on the left.
Hi, Rob. Dave mentioned the off-season program that you guys have for Taiwan Walker. I
Yeah.
guess, what is your confidence level that he'll be able to turn the page after the season that he had?
I think it's very high, because I think Taiwan's going into this thing, he's approaching it as if he's got to win a job. And so I think, knowing Ty, he's going to give his best effort to get this thing done. And I think during the season when we put him on this program, he was making strides. We had to cut the program off a little bit short because we needed him. I think if with the entire off season, I think we'll see more of an improvement. That's what I'm hoping.
Go to Scott on the left.
Hey, Rob, when you think about your offense and the profile of the offense as a whole, does it need to change a little bit? Did they maybe become a little too easy to pitch to throughout the course of the year? How do you sort of view how the offense profiles just in general?
Yeah, I think, and I've spoken to it many times, I think we really have to get them to buy into using the entire field. I think that will, and I know everybody talks about chase rate. I think just doing that will cut down on chase rate because you're going to stay on the ball a little bit longer, and you're going to, you watch the playoff series, the Yankees game. I just pulled up. I didn't watch the game, but I pulled up all their base hits. Everything was from gap to gap last night, and if you do that, you have a chance to cover all pitches in any zone, and you're not going to be susceptible to the off-speed away, especially. So I think, again, it'll cut down on chase, and you have a better chance to get base hits. These guys are so strong, our power guys. They can hit the ball out of any part of the ballpark. They just have to be able to stay on the ball.
So, I mean, obviously you'll coach them up a little bit to do that sort of thing, but does the mix need to change at all? I mean, do you have the personnel to hit the ball, to use the field the way you want to consistently?
Oh, I think so. I really do. You take the young guys, Bohm, Stott, Marsh. They all have the ability to hit the ball the other way. Harper obviously does. Castellanos, when he's at his best, he's hitting the ball the other way. We got to get Trea, and Trea knows that that's the way what his approach needs to be. We just have to make sure that we can help him in every way to get that done. And it's nothing that Kevin and the other hitting coaches haven't been pushing. We just have to get them to buy in and come up with a plan for them.
Okay, Todd on the left.
Rob, now the last two postseason series offensively have not gone well. Wondering why you think the message that Kevin Long and his staff is delivering is reaching his players in terms of why you wanted them to come back.
With Kevin?
Yeah, with Kevin.
Oh, I think if you go around baseball and you talk to every baseball person and say, okay, give me your top 5 hitting coaches in baseball, he's going to be on almost every list, and he's going to be number 1 on a lot of lists. I think, it's a random game. People get sped up. We got to be able to slow them down. And even if they have the opposite field approach, still they get sped up at times. We have to make sure that they're doing little things, pass baton, trust your teammates, keep the line moving.
Is it realistic to expect these guys to go into the offseason and make changes? In other words, like maybe this is just kind of who they are offensively, and no matter how much you talk about using the whole field and gap to gap, that these just aren't the guys that can do that?
Well, I think to a man we've seen at times all of them being able to use the field. So I think that they need to take that approach a little bit more, and I think they can do it.
Okay, go to Dave right in the front.
I recognize, Rob, that we're almost a week removed from Game 4, but to go back to Game 4, what was the reason that Zach didn't have a role other than emergency pitcher in extra innings? Why wasn't he used in the 6th to maybe give you a couple of innings, and I guess by extension, Christopher Sanchez as well?
Well, Zach's working on 3 days rest, and Sanchez working on 2 days rest. So I'm not gonna put their future in doubt with this franchise. I just won't. I was a little more. It was Sanchez's bullpen day. Zach had thrown a bullpen the day before, getting ready for Game 5. So I was a little bit. Sanchez was a little bit more available to me than Zach was. Now we get into that game and we get into leverage situations late in games coming out of the bullpen. Sanchez hasn't done that all year, so that's why I stuck with our main relievers, who had been very good all year. It just for whatever reason, it just didn't happen in the postseason. So that's where I'm at with that.
And I know you expressed last week that the window is certainly not closed on this ball club, but after finishing further away from a world championship for 2 consecutive seasons after 22. Why should fans believe that next season this club can make a deep run in October like 22?
Well, I think just because of the core. I mean, we have a good ball club. This is the roster is a championship roster. It really is. Dave and the front office have done a great job. Now, we haven't gotten it done. I haven't gotten it done. Do we make some tweaks for next year? Do we, we've already talked about it. Do we turn the lineup around or move people around to possibly get a more consistent offense? I don't know. We got to talk about it. At the start of the season, do we give more guys more days off? And I'm not just talking JT or 1 or 2. I'm talking about everybody. Just so that maybe, was it fatigue that set in July? Maybe by giving guys an extra day off here and there early, we can extend that run a little bit longer and right into October.
Let's go to Martin on the left.
Hey, Rob. Obviously, this year there was a big concern about Marsh and Stott hitting lefties. Do you still think those guys can become good hitters against left-handed pitchers, or do you kind of go into next year thinking you might have to platoon, keep platooning those guys?
I think the performance of Marsh the last month, 6 weeks against lefties showed me a lot. Like he changed his approach. At the start of the season, he started off very well, and then I think he may have gotten a little pull happy, and then he got back to hitting the ball the other way and thinking the other way anyway. And I think that really helped him against left-handed pitching, and so it gives me a little bit of confidence that has that ability. And I think Stott has always had that ability. I just think Stott's swing changed a little bit during the course of the year. He's got to get back to who he is, and that's grinding out pitchers, seeing a lot of pitches, using the other field, hitting line drives. We don't expect him to hit 25 home runs. He's going to run into some, but we need to get him on base and chew up pitches for the rest of the lineup.
Go to Alex in the front.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Alex.
We know that chase rate was a big focus from spring training on, but you mentioned the importance of using the whole field, hitting the ball the other way. How much of a focus was that? How, much was that message delivered to the guys?
I think that message was delivered almost on a daily basis, and I think you just have to get them to slow the game down at times and stay in that approach. Be cognizant that pitchers are going to try and get you to chase because that's what the numbers say. If you stay with that approach, I think you cut down on chase. I think you get more base hits, and I think you score more runs.
Is there something you think the coaching staff or the player, something that could be done differently so that message works a little bit more or gets through a little bit more?
Yeah, that'll be something that Kevin and the coaching and the hitting coaches and I will talk about and see if there's some drills or some cues, whatever, to get them to do that.
Okay, Jim on the left.
Rob, do you plan on spending any time with Bohm, or have you spent any time with Bohm? Talk to him after the frustration he showed. I know after you sat him, you spoke to him, but will that be something you look at this winter and this offseason to get him in a good frame of mind? He's an important young player.
He really is, and he's a really good player, and he just, and I know that there's a lot of talk of, the second half or the last couple of months, his production wasn't the same, but he was, off the charts production at the start of the season. I'm not sure if you can expect a guy to maintain that through the entire year, and his numbers at the end of this year are actually better than they were last year, so he's making some improvement. But yeah, I think that is a priority of mine to maybe not spend time with him, but be on the phone with him, text with him, stay in contact with him.
And how did you end the season health-wise, in particular Bryce Harper with the elbow or the wrist? Will there be anything looked at down the road here or this offseason?
No, I think he just needs rest.
Okay, let's go to Dave Murphy in the middle.
Hey, Rob. If you look at Trea Turner, his fly ball rate has ticked up here recently, and the line drive rate is down from what it was when he was kind of really at his peak. But at the same time, I mean, pitching has gotten a lot better, since he broke into the majors. I think velo's up a couple miles an hour just since he broke in. So do you look at it as like there are things he can do mechanically to get kind of that line drive swing back and be that hitter that kind of peppers all corners of the field?
Absolutely.
Or is it more guys approaching him differently on the mound?
Oh, I think it's a little bit of both. I think they are approaching him a little bit differently. Excuse me. But yeah, I think there's some tweaks in his mechanics that Kevin will go to work on this winter to get him to use the field, to get him to hit line drives. He's another guy. He gets on base and he creates a lot of chaos, and we don't need him to hit. He's going to run into 25 just because he hits the ball. I don't know how he does it, as small as he is, but he hits the ball a long way. But we need to get him on base, and we need to get him to steal bases and create that havoc.
Okay, Devin in the front.
Hi, Rob. So you kind of touched on this earlier, but the second half of the season, or really when you guys returned from London, there was a clear drop-off. Is there one or even a few, specific things that you can pinpoint as to what happened? Was it burnout from the hot start, and how do you, prevent that from happening again next season?
Yeah, if it was that, like I touched on it earlier, maybe it's giving guys some days off earlier in the season so that the fatigue doesn't set in. But fatigue's going to set in with everybody in baseball. It's just a grueling game, and so many games and so many days. And yeah, I can't really put my finger on it. I know the questions have been asked, did they lose their edge? I don't think so. I mean, I'm around these guys every day, and they come in and work their tails off every day and compete. And I don't think there was anything like that. I think we just got on, we got into a bad spot there for a bit, and like every team, and we fought out of it. Let's not forget, we won 15 games in 5 out of the 6 months. So that's pretty good sledding. And we won 95 games to win a division, but that's not the standard here. The standard now is to win world championships. So I don't think there's any edge lost at all.
Let's go to Rob in the middle.
Rob, on the fatigue also, your catchers seem to be playing a lot as usual. Dave talked about a possible plan of cutting his time back a little bit. How realistically would you go about doing that given the current state of the backups?
Yeah, I've got to talk to JT about that, first of all. But, we'll put a plan together, and whoever that backup is, we don't know yet. But we'll put a plan together, because I think if you give JT some time off, some more time off, I think his numbers will get better.
Same category, really. Do you think fatigue played a big part in what happened with your bullpen in the postseason?
Geez, I don't think so. The velocity was still there. You take Hoffman's case, 80% first pitch strikes, 70% pre-2K strikes. He just had trouble putting them away, and I think he was trying to make perfect pitches to put people away, and that's why you saw a couple of spikes there in that last game. He was just trying to be too fine. But, I don't think fatigue had anything to do with it. I really don't.
Go to Tim in the right.
Following up on JT, he was asked in spring training if he thought he could benefit from a little more time off, and he kind of pushed back against it. So how do you convince him that might be what's best for him at this stage?
I'm not sure yet. He's a tough guy, and he's a guy like a lot of our guys. They want to play every day, but I'll have to do some convincing, I guess.
Okay, let's go to Ty, back left.
Rob, what did you make of Bryce's first full year at first base? His defense, and along with how you could maybe arrange the outfield every day. You don't have to worry about him only being the DH and moving back and forth. Just what do you make of that first full year?
With Harper being DH or Schwarber?
No, so what did you think of, in the last year you had to, Bryce was the DH, so then you had to fix Schwarber in the left. So what do you think of, one, Harper's defense, and then knowing he was going to be at first every single day and how that made up your alignment?
I thought he was fantastic at first base. I really did. For a guy that's never played there before, and everybody thinks, we'll just throw somebody at first base. It's not that easy. He really took to it very well. And I think he's, defensively one of the best first basemen in baseball, to tell you the truth. He's come that far that quick. And, he still gets caught out of position at times on ground balls, not 3-4 hole, but that a lot of first basemen do. He'll just get better at that. But he's quite an athlete. He really has, and quite a baseball mind to be able to take to that as quickly as he has.
Colin, front left.
Rob, how would you self-assess the way that you collaborated with Dave in the front office and delivered the best messages to the players that you want to be an emphasis of the team?
Ask that again.
How do you think you collaborated with Dave in the front office and delivered the right messages to the team?
Well, as far as collaboration with the front office, we work together very well. And even when we talk about the trade deadline, I was all in on not going after a fifth starter, to tell you the truth, because of where we were at with Tyler Phillips and Taiwan coming back, Turnbull coming back. We didn't know he was going to have a setback, and frankly, picking up Hayes, I thought was going to be a benefit. It didn't work out that way because he had the kidney infection, but Estevez did very well, and Banks played the role that he was supposed to play. So as far as the collaboration with that's very good. My message to the players is always about working hard, so preparing, competing, being selfless in what you do, and having fun at the same time. And they do that. They do that. They compete as well as anybody, and they have fun while they're doing it. It's a fun group to be around, and I wouldn't want to be around any other group.
Let's go to Marcus in the front.
Hey, Rob. Kyle Schwarber didn't have a great NLDS, but he hit almost 250 for the first time in a couple of years. And why do you think he improved as a hitter? And do you foresee him as your leadoff guy next year?
Well, the lineup construction, we're going to go through that and try and figure out a better way to have score runs on a consistent basis a little bit more. Is there a different way? Is it best to have Kyle in the leadoff spot? Don't know. We've won a lot of games with him in the leadoff spot, so we got to really think about this. I think the reason that he had a better year was he went into the offseason last year wanting to cut down on his strikeouts, and so he wanted to think more, just what I was talking about earlier, thinking more about hitting the ball the other way, staying on the baseball. And he did that, and I think it really helped him with left-handed pitching. His numbers against left-handed pitching were probably the best he's had in his career. And I think, if more guys take that approach, we're going to chase less, we're going to score more runs.
And I think we forget sometimes that JT missed about 5 or 6 weeks with a knee injury that he entered the season with and then dealt with during the down the stretch. He told me a couple times that it was always there. How much do you think that influenced his production year long, really, since he had it all year? And do you think that there could be an uptick next year if the knee is a little healthier?
Yeah, I think it affected him a lot with his numbers, and I do think that the numbers will go back up a little bit, and I'm hoping that if I can persuade him or talk to him about having a few more days off earlier in the season, that the numbers even get better.
Okay, go with Dave in the second row.
You guys ran into one of the hottest hitters you'll see in the postseason of Vientos, and I guess Lindor's not really far behind him at this point. And we've seen in your guys' runs how much that can matter when only one or two guys are just on that unconscious streak. Does it make it difficult to kind of like judge, what really happened when guys are that hot, and what you actually need to do with this team? How much of it was just a short series and two of the hottest hitters on the planet and a pitching staff you don't match up well with versus, something fundamentally needs to change?
Right, yeah. I think we ran into the hottest team in baseball. And what they went through on the doubleheader to get in and then go in and beat Milwaukee, they had a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum. And so not that we played particularly well, but we ran into a hot club. And so I think we some of this we need to downplay a little bit and not just think about blowing up the club, because that's not going to happen. One, and we got a really good roster. So short series, very random, this game. I really have a lot of confidence in this club moving forward.
I don't know if you can answer this without sounding like you're making excuses or anything, but I mean, a 5-game series, it's a short series, and it's a completely different animal than a 7-game series. Couple that with kind of the wild card format right now. Is there anything you would change about this postseason format in terms of, how do you reward teams that win the division and don't put? It just seems like people aren't playing on the same kind of even playing field when you've got teams, playing 3 games against teams that are off for 5 games. And is there anything you would change, whether it's a 7-game series in the NLDS or everyone plays in the wild card round?
Well, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about rules because they're out of my control. I would spend more time thinking about, okay, did we do the right thing between the end of the season and the first playoff game? Did I prepare these guys properly? That's what I think about. Do I want to play in the wild card series? Probably not. I mean, you want to win the division, right? That's your goal. So then you got to deal with, okay, what do you do with that time off? And did you do the right thing? Should we have had, instead of a 9-inning inter-squad game on Wednesday, should we have had a 4.5 inning and a 4.5 inning on Wednesday and Thursday? I don't know, but those are the things I think about as opposed to changing the format.
Okay, Anthony in the middle.
Rob, this might kind of relate to what you just said, but a year ago you sat here on this at the dais and said you did some self-reflection and there were some changes some things you would have liked to have done differently. I wonder if this year you've had some of those same thoughts. Are there things that you would have liked to have done differently?
Everything that went wrong, I would have liked to do differently.
Okay, Jeff here in the front.
Hey, Rob, I just wanted to know what encouraged you about Johan Rojas in the second half, and in Clearwater, what would you like to see him progress on?
Well, as his chase rate went down, his use of the field got better. I still want, the plan really is to improve on all of that, and also to cut down on his swing, make more contact, line drives. The home runs will come in time, with age, with experience. Continue to improve his bunting, although it got a lot better. His short game got a lot better. But I think just cutting down on his swing and being able to stay inside the baseball and use the entire field is number one for me.
Okay, got a couple more. Start with Alex on the left.
You and Dave have both mentioned that there are certain players in the lineup who don't need to hit a ton of home runs. I'm wondering, with guys like Stott, Rojas, Trea, did you sense that maybe they were trying to do that, trying too hard to hit home runs, or felt like they needed to?
Yeah, I think possibly at times, but those guys will end up hitting home runs, but we just want them to be better hitters, get on base, chew up pitches, they'll hit their home runs, especially Stott. He's strong enough. He's going to run into a few. Marsh is going to run into home runs. Bohm's going to run into home runs. Just be good hitters. Just, be table setters. That's what we're looking for with those guys.
Okay, Jimmy on the left.
Rob, you mentioned you would look at the lineup and how it might work best and evaluate if Kyle should hit elsewhere. If he's not the leadoff man, is the leadoff man here now, or do you need to go out and get somebody to fill that role?
Well, I think it would be here now. Some people may have to change their approach a little bit, but again, I don't know if that's the best thing to do, is to move Kyle out of the leadoff spot, because he's really good at it, but it may help protect other people.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll stop there. So thank you, Rob. Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining us today. Press box is open, as is
The press box is open. That's the bottom line as Rob Thomson concludes his State of the Season, State of the Team address. He said, we ran into the hottest team in baseball in the New York Mets. And when you look at how they won the doubleheader at the last regular season game of the season, you look at what they did to Milwaukee, and you look at how they played against the Phillies, it was really, really tough. He said, let's not forget we won 15 games in 5 of the 6 months, but that is not the standard. The standard is a world championship. He was asked several questions about the Phillies' inability to hit throughout the season, but certainly in the postseason. And he said he really believes that being able to hit the other way, being able to hit gap to gap, being able to hit a ball where it's pitched will cut down on the chase rate. He said if you do that, you'll be way more successful as a hitter, and it's something we're going to stress in the offseason and into the preseason in 2025. He was also asked about game number 4 and why Zach Wheeler and Christopher Sanchez made no appearance in game number 4. He said for Zach Wheeler, he would have been pitching on 3 days rest. Sanchez would have been 2 days rest. I wasn't going to put their future in doubt. That is something that he has always stuck throughout the season, that I'm not going to put anybody's physical body in jeopardy. He said, I'm not going to put those futures in doubt. With regard to hitting coach Kevin Long, he said, I think if you surveyed every baseball person in the major leagues and you asked them to come up with their top 5 hitting instructors, Kevin Long is in that top 5 list, and he's number 1 on a lot of those lists, according to Rob Thomson. He was also asked about the lineup and what they're going to do with the lineup. He said, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to turn it around. We're going to have to give it some tweaks. There will be consideration given to moving Kyle Schwarber out of the leadoff spot, although he said, look, the guy has been very successful in the leadoff spot. He thinks that if that were to happen, that the leadoff hitter who would replace Schwarber there is on the team. In other words, they would not have to go out and acquire anybody. With going back to Dave Dombrowski, a couple of things. Dombrowski was asked about Alec Bohm, and he said he really thinks that Alec Bohm is an all-star player, something he showed in the first half of the season, that he was coming off a hand injury, and that slowed him up and got him frustrated in the second half of the season, and certainly in the postseason. We mentioned the outfield earlier, Bryce Harper, and any thought to renegotiating his deal. His agent, Scott Boras, had floated something out earlier in the season. He said, I'm keeping that in-house. We never talk about contract negotiations. Ranger Suarez, Dave Dombrowski said, yes, I hope he's with the club for a long period of time. I like his first half better than his second half, but Ranger Suarez belongs with the Phillies. And again, to reiterate, JT Realmuto banged up, missed 4, 5, 6 weeks with a knee issue, and you heard Marcus Hayes ask this of Rob Thomson, a knee issue that he had entered the season with, and they're going to have to cut down on a little bit on his playing time just to preserve his body. They'll be looking for a replacement catcher, whether or not it's Garrett Stubbs or Rafael Marchand, who they really like. We'll see what happens in that regard. So that is the state of the team. They bowed out early, unfortunately, as we know, this postseason. but that's what happens in baseball, as Dave Dombrowski stressed. We remind you, coming up at 6:30, we will replay selected portions of this media availability at 6:30 and at 9:30. I'm Michael Barkan. Have a great day, everybody.